Thank you, Diana. Hello, everybody. We're going to begin with our opening words today. We bid you welcome. We do not ask what you believe or expect you to think a certain way, but only that you try to live a kindly, helpful life with the dignity proper to a human being. Welcome all who believe that religion is wider than any sect and deeper than any set of opinions. We welcome all who might find in our friendship strength and encouragement for daily living. Again, good morning. My name is Mark Petrie. Welcome to the Universalist Unitarian Church of Farmington. I happen to be chair of the fundraising committee. So I'd just like to take the opportunity to remind everybody that we are having our service auction this Saturday. Very exciting. And I'd like to thank you again, all of you who have donated your precious time and resources to the auction. It's shaping up to be very fun, and we're really looking forward to it. Just a few notes, last second things about the auction. Wednesday, we need you to register no later than that, because we need to be able to order the food that we're going to, tasty food that we're going to put together. Linda's very graciously heading that up as we speak. And any last minute donations for the live auction, please do see us as soon as possible if you need any assistance with that, as we were trying to get the book done and completed and out to you by Wednesday. So make sure to watch your email for that as well. And for those of you who think you need a little bit of practice bidding in the live auction, you can join us in the Zoom, at the Zoom link that we'll be sending out at 6:45 on Saturday, and we'll have a little bit of time to practice that. All right, I'm gonna switch back over to the good stuff here. Okay, here we go. Let's see, I'd like to extend a special welcome to any visitors today. Please join us outside this, after the service for refreshments and conversation. And we're gathering outside while the weather permits, of course. When indoors, we are observing COVID precautions and wearing masks regardless of vaccination status. If you are visiting us for the first time and you are comfortable doing so, we invite you to stand and tell us where you're from and how you heard about us. We would like to meet you. Anybody there? Okay. We're all company people today. All right, great. Of course, let's see. Okay, I can skip over that part. Due to COVID precautions, we do ask that if you have a joy or sorrow today that you'd like to share with us, please fill out a blue card and give it to an usher, and it will be read later in the service. You can also text me personally. My number, starting with 310, is on the first page of the order of service. Please include your name in the text in case I don't recognize your number. And as we begin our service, we remember that our UU principles begin with our pledge to affirm and promote the inherent dignity and worth of all people. We are a welcoming congregation. We welcome into our community people of all races, sexual orientation, gender identities, and belief systems. And if you would all please join me in the shared affirmation of our mission. We seek answers everywhere, include everyone, and live with compassion. Okay, and announcements. Does anybody else have any announcements from any committees, etc.? Okay, terrific. Can move on then. Please do check the order of service for any other announcements about upcoming events, and please take a moment to silence your phone. And moving on, we'll just go ahead and go with our first hymn. Number 1001 in your teal hymnal, Breaths.
Because this is kind introduction for you before you begin. That's to give you a good head start.
So we've come to Halloween, and tomorrow, Monday, is All Saints' Day, and Tuesday is All Souls' Day. This is a time to remember our ancestors. We've all heard the cliche, you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you have come from. And perhaps William Faulkner's best-known line is, "The past is never dead, it's not even past." Today, my small way of remembering and honoring the ancestors is in wearing this stole that was made for me by my friend Reka Balint, who's a Hungarian Unitarian from Transylvania. Transylvania was the hotbed of Unitarian thought during the Radical Reformation in Europe 475 years ago. And it's in the style of traditional Hungarian embroidery from that area of Transylvania. My goal for the service today is for us to hear some stories so we can learn a little bit more about where we, as the Universalist Church of Farmington, come from. I asked George Rourke to help me, and we've invited 7 longtime members to come up and share a story about UUCF. Some stories are from personal memory, and some stories are from written archival research. And the speakers are listed in your order of service. My hope for the day is that this will be fun, and it will be a small act of honoring the ancestors and the stories, as well as honoring the chroniclers, the amateur historians, and the storytellers. They keep us grounded, for without them, we would be groundless. So I welcome you all up now, and as you come up, Diana's going to play Grandma Tells a Ghost Story.
Good morning, I'm Chuck Eglinton, and I think pretty much everyone here knows me from working on the sound for a number of years. This is my first time actually speaking at the pulpit during a Sunday morning, so. This is, the people in the slide above me are Sergius P. Lyon, who my wife is a big fan of. He's the founder of the church, and Farmington was settled in 1924 by Arthur Power of Farmington, New York, and they originally called the Farmington area Quakertown or Powerville, and they decided on the name Farmington. And so what we have here are our first minister, and on the right, and the church from a couple decades ago, and Sergius P. Lyon. And I just want to point out that Gwen Foss was a member here for many years, and she gave us, after years of research, she gave us about 500 book pages of church history. And so I'm going to try to make this brief, but I thank Gwen Foss for 500 pages to sift through. So Farmington was settled in 1824, and this is a map of downtown Farmington in 1870. And at the top, you'll notice that Shiawassee Road was originally an Indian trail. The Indians continued to use it. The green line is Farmington Road, and the red line is Grand River. And what I want to point out here is that the Indians continued to use the trail. And Phoebe Sherman Ross, born in 1854, wrote that Indian Chief Whitehorn, who, hearing her family at a Union Society meeting, asked if his people could join them. So there were years that Indians actually attended our Union Church when it was first established. So Sergius P. Lyon was our church's, one of the original settlers, and he was a master builder and the town undertaker for 13 years in Farmington. He invented a self-regulating wood-burning stove, and he was a stove maker for 13 years. And the mic stand here, No, I don't see it. Barb says you can see it, but the, oh, that's me. So there was originally a wood-burning stove right there, and that's what heated the church. He built and owned the funeral home that's downtown Farmington, behind the Civic, off on Farmington and Grand River, the Heaney-Sundquist funeral home. So Lyon sought not only to provide a place where his fellow worshipers might hold such services in their hearts, but also offer the same privilege to other Christians of whatever creed. So he called it the Union Church because he thought that other people would attend the church. And this is Farmington Road, and that's Mr. Lyon's home, which is now burned down. But at the top left, you'll see the First Baptist Church, which still stands there today. It's much wider, but it's still there. And I just wanted to point out a couple things about downtown Farmington at the time. At the top left is the First Baptist Church, and then the First Methodist Church used to actually be on Shiawassee Road. It eventually burned down in 1920, but they were in the corner of a farmer's land, and they had to put in their church bulletin to not let the cows graze on the church property. And then right below that was the Farmington Church at Thomas and Warner from 1853 until 1966. And you'll see that the Methodist Church is just north of our church, and that's an important point that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. You'll notice that there was a slaughterhouse just north of the Methodist Church on the north side of Shiawassee. And at the lower right, down here, was a sawmill. In the 1800s, Farmington had about 8 different mills, some for food and some for wood. And that was a wood sawmill that's now, if you go to Shiawassee Park, there's a parking lot there, there's Zip Power Road and Grand River. That used to be a pond, and they used to have a sawmill there. And you know, when it floods these days, when it rains, it usually floods. And there were more sawmills, but Farmington Road used to go straight north. And you can't see it behind that Baptist church balloon. They show how Farmington Road used to go up, and there were some mills there. And I think the Bays actually took us for a walk back there, and the bridge still exists. Nothing. No, nothing. And so you can see this Farmington Civic is there, and Starbucks for reference. So this is what Farmington looked like in the mid-1800s. That's actually a picture of downtown Farmington in the 1870s. So that would have been 20 years after this church was built. The land was called Methodist Hill, where we built our church, because the Methodists had already built a church nearby. And I just want you to look around. This post, this beam at the top, is where the church used to end. And it was originally 30 by 40 feet. So the back wall there and the side walls, and then that's where it ended, is where the beam is. And it was the Greek Revival style, and the roof insulation was straw. And I talked to Dave Petzel this morning. He said, yep, the straw is still up there. So above your heads is 180-year-old straw. And he said there's also some additional insulation from later years, but the straw is still up there. So Reverend Woolley, who was our first minister, lived in Birmingham, and he rode by horseback on a circuit to give sermons at different churches. Reverend Woolley died before the meeting house was finished. And this picture was likely taken after 1900 because originally there were just doors there in that back beam.
People was full of 100-year-old bird poop.
So this is taken after 1900 because it has an entryway. Originally there was no entryway on the church. Was there anything else? Oh, I know. The other thing is the frame of this church, again, was probably built from wood that was from the sawmill that was at Power Road and Grand River. The beams are 16 inches by 16 inches, and they're held together with pegs. That's the main area there. And both Dave Petzel and I have experienced that when we ran the wiring for the internet cables underneath the floor here. There are 16 by 16 timbers that we had to go around, and the plumbing all goes around these timbers that hold the main body of the church. So this picture was likely taken after 1910, and you'll see off to the right there on the bottom, that's a shed for horses and buggies. Horses and buggies, and you see the electric line there. Eastern Michigan Edison Company wired Farmington for electricity, and they turned on the switch for electricity on October 28th, 1911. So this picture would have been after 1911. The other interesting thing is that we found this in the archive, the church archive, And it was a grayed out picture, and we ran it through a scanner, and somebody had hand colored it. The actual postcard was hand colored. And downtown, when I was in downtown Farmington, they built a house for the minister. It's called the Manse, and it used to sit right on the corner. Also, when it was on downtown Farmington, they actually picked up the church and rotated it 90 degrees to put the entrance at Warner, and they put a basement under it, and they cut a door so you could get to the basement, the Adams Hall. And so if you actually walk on our church and walk around the outside and look at the wall where the sound cabinet is, you can still see the cutout where the door used to be before they moved the church. And so this is the corner. If you're standing at Tres Amigos and you're in the back parking lot and you look over into the corner, you'll see the Maxfield Academy. This is the Maxfield Academy parking lot. That yellow rectangle is where our church used to sit. And between the corner and that yellow rectangle is where the manse was, where the minister's house was. And that's Walter Kellison, who's posing in a picture standing by the church, and you see the Maxfield Academy behind him. And we're going to go back to Barb next to talk about how this church moved from downtown Farmington to the spot that we're on now. I just wanted to jump just a little bit ahead and say that this whole section that I'm standing on, and this is over the kitchen for downstairs, and that was added in 1985. And here are some pictures of that. And this is what the social hall used to look like. The kitchen used to be at the opposite end of where it is now. The storage room, the supply room, is where the kitchen used to be. And you'll see a gentleman there with a beard. I don't know who that guy is, but it's actually George Rourke. Whoever George Rourke is, that's George from. And I think Barb's going to speak next. We're going to come back to the ladies' union, ladies. But next, Barb Windsor's going to speak about the move.
It was downtown Farmington, and every Saturday I would go to the fire department and get permission to burn out what we had to get rid of. And what we did was, the church we shared it with the Quakers. So during the Civil War, Sojourner Truth spoke from our pulpit in downtown Farmington. And it's record in the church's records that Sojourner Truth spoke at our pulpit in downtown Farmington because we shared it with the Quakers. Now what they did was they picked the coldest day in February, literally. And I was working in Ann Arbor, and I left work early, and I came, and I said, where's the church, where's the church? They took it down Freedom Road. What they had to do was, when they got to Freedom Road, they would pull it up to the top, unhook, run around, and then lower it down the next hill. Unhook, go to the top, because they had to have the church below the truck. Otherwise, the church would run over the truck. Also, they carved 4 big, huge turnbuckles and iron things that went across like that. And they tightened them so the wood walls wouldn't bow. And when we got down, we finally got it down right inside the gravel there at 7 o'clock at night, and it was there.
There's a picture of the move that Barb was just talking about.
See, in fact, they used the company that moved the Mariners Church in downtown Detroit. We figured if they can move that, they can move our wooden church.
And they did, quite nicely. That was just about the time that I joined the church. I didn't actually see the move. I had a brand new baby to take care of. I was kind of young then. And that was a very interesting time when we first moved here. And however, the architect who designed it made one big mistake. Well, maybe 2 or 3, but this was a big one. When he designed the RE building, he put a flat roof on it. And that led to all kinds of problems with roof leaks and mold. And so we needed to do something about that flat roof over the RE building. So we had a member of the church, it was Don Oswell, an electrician who knew a lot about building, having worked in the building trades, and he proposed that we put on a peaked roof, and that would solve our flat roof problems. And so we did that one nice summer Sunday. Well, I think it was like in June. Well, anyway, it was a very nice day, the day that we put on that peaked roof. And there we are, putting it up. I was there. I was up on top of that roof. I think Barb was too. And we had a whole bunch of people. We had a whole groups of people going up and down on the roof, a few at a time on the roof. And we worked on it all day long on a Sunday. And sometime in late Sunday afternoon, we had the roof closed in, not finished totally, but nevertheless closed in case it rained. And after we were done with that day's work, where all of us had worked so long and so hard, we actually had one of our church members run a blood drive for the Red Cross. And after we were done, we had donuts and orange juice and gave blood. So it was a very, very good day. You know, one of the things that's happened through the years is I have participated in different events here at the church, all the way from putting the roof on the RE building to running parties and doing dinners and memorial service, participating in memorial services and doing things. Oh, I think the last one I did was maybe 10 years ago. We did the goddess group, which was a great success. Told them all they were goddesses because they were. And so we had a lot of interesting events through the years after that. And in this participation in this wonderful church, where every year I kept learning and growing and changing, I learned the connections you could make. And that is the best thing that I've gotten from this church, is growing, learning, changing, and connecting with so many wonderful people over the years. And it's been a life, and I've loved it, and it's become my home because of the connections. Thank you.
I'm going to tell a story that's part of the book that Chuck mentioned earlier about the history of this congregation. And later in the book, it describes some very lean years in the history of the church. And this special bequest that we received was one of the reasons the church was able to survive during that period. This is about the bequest from Betsy Longnecker. On 20 May 1911, in the village of Wixom, Novi Township, an elderly woman passed away, leaving almost all her property to the Universalist Church of Farmington, and granting the remaining small portion to her niece. In doing so, she completely cut off her brother and nephew. These slighted relatives, Albert Bowen and Ford Birch, contested the will on the grounds of undue influence. The Betsy Longnecker will case was to engage the attention of the community, the church trustees, and the state convention for the next 2 years. A native of Vermont, Betsy E. Longnecker survived 2 husbands, the last dying in 1881. In the 1890s, she was a resident of Milford Township and was attending a Universalist church. It is not known why she left her estate to the church, but it's possible she was attached to the Universalist church at New Hudson, which had long since ceased to be, or to another defunct congregation, and rather than leave her money to her relatives, she bequeathed it to the nearest Universalist church. According to the Farmington Enterprise, her will stipulated, after her funeral expenses are paid and a Universalist minister has been paid for officiating at her funeral, the remainder of her property shall go to the Universalist Society of Farmington. Only the income is to be used for the repairing of the church and for paying the preacher's salary. If the society at Farmington should ever be given up, it is the desire of the deceased that the property be turned over to the Michigan State Convention of Universalists, and the money to be used to promote the cause in the state. That's from the Farmington Enterprise, 30 June 1911. The only clue to the amount of the bequest is the existence of the church's financial records of the Longnecker Trust Fund, which was administered until 1951. The principal that year was reported to be $5,464.16. This was in 1951. The congregation voted to turn the assets over to the Building Improvement Fund. The last mention of the Longnecker generous bequest was a note that the income amounted to only $8.50. Because of the importance of this bequest, this Betsy Longnecker bequest, Betsy Longnecker was made a member of the Gibson Society, which was founded in the early 1990s at this church for any members who will include UUCF in their wills. The only other historical members of the society are Farley and Ethel Gibson, and all the members of the Gibson Society are commemorated in this plaque that's sitting behind me, that normally hangs in the back of the church.
That's Farley up on the slide.
Well, that's Farley Gibson.
Right.
Behind us here on this plaque
Yeah.
is the list of the Gibson Society.
The apple orchard used to exist south of the parking lot. That's where he was.
Supporting equal rights for women has always been important to our church members. After the Roe v. Wade decision was handed down by the Supreme Court in 1973, many states started passing laws to restrict its provisions. In 1991, the Supreme Court agreed to hear a case, Casey v. Planned Parenthood, on Pennsylvania legislation that put many strict restrictions on the provisions of Roe v. Wade. There was deep concern among many women's groups that the court would use this case to strike down the Roe v. Wade decision. Under the leadership of the National Organization for Women and supported by hundreds of groups across the country, a March for Women's Lives was organized to flood Washington, D.C. with pro-choice supporters, especially women. Several women from our church, along with myself, stuffed a backpack with essentials, put on our warm, comfortable clothing and shoes, and together headed to Washington, D.C. on a bus, one of hundreds of buses. The march was held on April 5th, 1992. We had to arrive by mid-morning as the march started at noon, so we left on that bus in the very, very early hours. of Saturday. There were people everywhere when we got there. It was amazing to see wall-to-wall people, all talking with each other, all carrying signs and banners. There were people from every state and beyond. We did locate some women from other UU churches by looking for their signs and banners, and we walked with them. It was exhilarating to walk through the city, and a special moment when we walked past the White House and filled the parkland between the Capitol building and the Washington Monument. It was about 55 degrees and sunny, but after 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 hours out of doors, we were very cold. You kind of took food where you could find it, and frankly, I never thought this would happen, but the porta potty became my favorite friend. There were several speakers, many very well known, but we really weren't there to hear much of what they said. We were too far back. But the speakers weren't why we were there. It was to make a statement with our presence. The attendance was estimated between 300,000 and 500,000, all there to support the right of every woman to have control over her body. And we are still fighting for that right. Near the Washington Monument, a memorial had been erected that read, "In memory of the courageous women who died from illegal, unsafe abortions because they had no choice." We left as a group and found our bus. During the night, we rode back to Michigan. It was very, very quiet on the bus, in part because we were very tired, but also, I think, we realized how long it would take and how hard it would be to win the right for a woman to have control over her own body. The case was argued before the court on April 22nd, 1992, and the decision rendered on June 29th, 1992. Unfortunately, the court upheld most of the very strong restriction of provisions of the Pennsylvania law, but they also reaffirmed Roe v. Wade.
Well, let's see if I can read my writing. Nobody else can. Dot and I started attending UUCF when the church was downtown, so we've been a member for a long time. At the time, I worked 6 days a week, so Sunday was my leisure day. Church wasn't something I felt I needed. But UUCF's values were something I was close to. After several years, we attended several of the dinners some of the members put on and became quite acquainted with people outside the church atmosphere and found new friends. One of the ministers started a meeting with the seniors in the church who met at lunch once a month for snacks and conversation. After a while, we began going to various places like Belle Isle, museums, and flower gardens, which became very delightful. Another minister started a noshing group, which met once a month at each of the people's houses, where everyone helped to make the dinner. It started out with 4 groups, in which 3 only lasted about 10 years. My group, the 4th, lasted over 20 years. And when some of the people retired and moved away, the group would go to their house in the west side of the state for the whole weekend. This was one of the most enjoyable times for all of us. The church and the members became 80% of Dot and my social life. It is and became one of the most important institutions in our life. And just to show you how old I am, I forgot completely to mention the artist group, which Jack Oles ran, and it was very active in the church, and lots of members joined in. I can't say enough about it. So thank you very much.
I'm going to speak about, can you hear that? I don't know if this is coming through. Okay. Three things. First, I didn't know Chuck was going to show that picture. And you may note that I shaved this morning. So. That's this. The second was that I'm reading a section of the book that's been referenced a few times. It's we're working on for the history of the church, and Barb Eglinton thought this was pretty significant, and I'm presenting it for her. And this has to do with the Ladies' Union. It is no exaggeration to say that between 1800 and 1950, the First Universalist Church of Farmington, now UUCF, underwent a number of near-death experiences. Each time disaster loomed, however, it seemed that there were just enough members to pitch in and prevent its final demise. I think Harry's discussion about Betsy Longnecker is, again, part of that story of getting bailed out at the last minute in different times. The Ladies' Union may be given a large measure of credit for rescuing the church from complete failure in the latter 19th century and early 20th centuries. Through the tireless efforts of its dedicated members, it rapidly became the mainstay of the congregation. The purposes for the existence of the Ladies' Union were many: to raise money for the church for the charitable Universalist causes, to organize receptions and parish dinners, to serve as an avenue for the local interaction of its members, to provide educational experiences for those who attended its meetings, and to plan and carry out projects for the betterment of the church and community. Membership in the Ladies' Union was open to all women in the community, regardless of religious affiliation. Much like other local clubs and organizations of the day, the Ladies' Union was governed by 4 annually elected officers: the president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. Meetings were divided into 4 parts: devotional, business meeting, program, and refreshments. There was a different woman in charge of each part. Programs varied, but always consisted of something of an educational manner. Guest speakers were not uncommon. One important goal of the Ladies' Union was to raise a minimum amount per year to benefit the local congregation. To this end, they held countless fundraising activities, such as 10-cent lunches, ice cream socials, evening entertainments, and bake sales. They sewed aprons and quilts and donated the money raised from their sales. On some occasions, they raised enough money to acquire guest preachers while the church had no regular pastor. And in that vein, I encourage you all to be participating in our auction. It's a week from now.
That's not up on the projector.
Ah, yes. I have one more story. This one has to do with Halloween, and it's about 50 years ago. It was either 70 or 71. I came here on the Sunday of Halloween, and the back doors were open, which was unusual because the weather was pretty chilly, and we didn't have them open in days of harsh weather. And as I walked up to the church, I could see it was black, dark. It was all dark inside. The doors were open. There were 2 ushers, and they were in black robes, and they said nothing. As you came up, they just nodded. And this was, of course, highly unusual. I walked in, and I realized that there was coverings over all of the windows. That's why it was so dark in here. And up here on the altar, there were 2 sawhorses. And as I got used to the darkness, I found a seat. I could make out that on these sawhorses was a coffin. And there was very eerie music playing. It's a very scary place. And at the foot of the coffin was a candelabra with about 4 candles lit. And at the head of the coffin was another candelabra. And so the music got a little louder. It was about time for church to start. It was very dark, but they had this music getting louder and louder. And then it stopped. We were silent in the darkness with the candlelight. And up out of the coffin rose our minister. I can't tell you what he talked about that day. But he was one of the most dramatic ministers we had. His name was Rick Neff. And Chuck found something else out about Rick Neff. That's a picture of him there. And I'm going to conclude this, I'm going to pass the mic back to Chuck, and he's going to tell you a little bit more about Rick Neff.
I guess George did not know that Ricky Neff, well, I think you knew he was from California, right? You said you knew he was from California. So Ricky Neff was in California, I guess in Berkeley in the 60s. And he's a credited writer and lyricist. And on one of Joan Baez's, on her debut album, he is credited as the arranger and the lyricist for the song John Riley, which Joe is going to play for us in a second. You'll see the lyrics up on the screen. But he was the lyricist and arranger for John Riley, which was a traditional song that had very, very many choruses, and he whittled them down to a couple choruses, which was the version that was recorded. And also Silver Dagger, which you can find by Joan Baez, The Byrds, and Dolly Parton. So, Joe, if you want to play that YouTube with John Riley. That's it.
Fair young maid, all in a garden, strange young man, passer by, said, fair maid, will you marry me? This then, sir, was her reply. Sir, I cannot marry thee, for I've a love who sails all on the seas. He's been gone for 7 years, still no man shall marry me. Some battle slain, or drowned in the deep salt sea. What if he's found another love, and he and his love both married be? If he's in some battle slain, I will die when the moon doth wane. If he's drowned in the deep salt sea, I'll be true to his memory. And if he's found another love, and he and his love both married be, I wish them health and happiness where they dwell across the sea. saying we'd no more my own true love. I am your long lost John Riley.
Thank you all for sharing our stories. George told me that story of Rick Neff on his Halloween service, and then I had some old pictures in my minister's office of Reverend Leonetta in these elaborate witch outfits she wore on Halloween, and I was like, these are really big shoes. I don't know if I'll be able to fill. But I'm very grateful to be a UU minister that we can be so creative up here in the pulpit and still keep our jobs. So that's what I thought. Thank you all so much for sharing your stories and sharing your personal stories and the historical stories from before our time as well, so we know where we came from. I invite you all now to share in a moment of stillness and silence together. May it be so. Amen. This fellowship is a community of ourselves. Its energy and its resources are our energy and resources. Its wealth is what we share. As we contribute to the life of this community, we affirm our lives with it. This morning's offering will now be gratefully received, and Diana is going to play Funeral March of a Marionette, which is the theme song for Alfred Hitchcock Presents.
A perfect heart is one that has known love and loss, joy and sorrow. The perfect heart is one that has been shared. As joys and sorrows of our community are shared, please direct your energy, prayers, and meditations as a gift of compassion and strength. And I know that I am certainly very joyful to be a part of this congregation with so much history and care and love. Thank you so much again for our leaders for sharing with Today is number 16, "'Tis a Gift to be Simple." Please rise as you're willing and able.
Sing it twice.
Because of those who came before, we are. In spite of their failings, we believe. Because of and in spite of the horizons of their vision, we too dream. Let us go, remembering to praise, to live in the moment, to love mightily, to bow to the mystery. I'll see you all having treats on the trail. Go in peace.